Welcome back to the Moon Talks with Dad channel. Today, we are going to look at how to outsmart the aging brain. To start, I want you to try a simple physical test. Stand up, close your eyes, and try to balance on one leg for exactly 30 seconds. If you find yourself immediately wobbling or putting your foot down, it reveals a specific diagnostic truth. Your brain is actively developing into an old brain, regardless of your actual biological age. This timeline plots chronological age against cognitive capacity to show the default path of human aging. The brain starts to physically shrink at 30, and by our 50s, our capacity to understand the emotions of others steeply drops off. However, recent research led by neuroscientist Nishi Takayuki proves that this specific timeline of cognitive decline is not an inevitable biological destiny. An old brain is simply the physical accumulation of our daily habits and behaviors. Because we build those habits ourselves, cognitive aging is a highly malleable condition that we actively control rather than a passive fate we have to accept. This brings us to a psychological concept called subjective age. In 1959, Harvard University ran a striking experiment to test this. Researchers took a group of 70-year-old men and placed them inside an isolated, meticulously constructed time capsule for 5 days. Every environmental cue inside the building was engineered to trick the subjects' brains. By surrounding them with vintage magazines, black and white television broadcasts, and retro music, the environment convinced them they had traveled 22 years into the past. The researchers enforced a single strict rule. The participants had to act, speak, and think exactly as their younger selves would have in that specific era. The physiological results over just 5 days were startling. The participants exhibited improved vision, their manual dexterity increased, their posture straightened, and independent observers rated them as looking visibly younger. The physical state of the brain follows the lead of psychological input. When a person adopts a younger subjective age, their belief system triggers a cascade of physiological changes that slow the biological clock. Mindset isn't the only input. The words we speak act as a highly specific programming language. A landmark study from New York University investigated how simply reading specific words alters human biomechanics. When researchers exposed healthy college students to words associated with aging, like forgetful or tired, those students literally walked out of the room at a slower, more sluggish pace compared to a control group. This flowchart illustrates how language affects biology. Vocalizing phrases like, "I'm old," or "I'm tired," sends an input triggering an involuntary physiological shutdown within your nervous system. To intercept these negative triggers, neuroscientists recommend a practical hack, the but roll. If you catch yourself saying, "I'm exhausted," you immediately append the word but, followed by a positive action, like, "I'm exhausted, but I finished my work." Because the brain heavily weights the end of a sentence, that positive finish overrides the initial negative command. Everyday vocabulary goes beyond simple communication. It functions as a literal programming code that dictates your daily physical vitality. All of this ties back to our underlying neurochemistry. As we get older, our levels of dopamine, the hormone responsible for driving basic desire, appetite, and physical enthusiasm, naturally deplete. This line graph tracking a standard lifespan shows a biological paradox. While dopamine drops off over time, the brain compensates by significantly increasing its production of a completely different hormone in old age, oxytocin. Oxytocin shifts the brain's focus toward connection and contribution. As this hormone rises, the brain begins to prioritize social value and the feeling of being useful over simple dopamine-driven rewards. This is why finding an ikigai, a daily sense of purpose, whether tending to a garden, planning a trip, or caring for a pet, is so highly effective. That daily engagement acts as a direct catalyst for an oxytocin surge. A daily sense of purpose acts as a biological shield. By consistently triggering oxytocin, you are providing the brain with the specific chemical environment it needs to resist structural decay. Aging is no longer a passive slide into forgetfulness and physical decay. It is an active, daily negotiation between your mind and your body. Think back to the 30-second one-leg stand test we discussed earlier. Because the brain and the body's balance system are directly proportional, training yourself to hit that 30-second mark forces the brain to reorganize and regain its youthful coordination. This daily repetition effectively re-engages the neural pathways that otherwise go dormant as the brain shrinks. By controlling your mindset, filtering your language, and pursuing a daily purpose, you become the architect of your brain's youth. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.